The person who betrayed you did not wake up one morning and suddenly decide to destroy your trust. The betrayal began long before the moment you discovered it, hidden inside a psychological process that was unfolding silently in their mind. Imagine this. You are sitting alone one night, staring at your phone. Maybe you have just read a message. Maybe you discovered a secret. Maybe someone you loved simply walked away without explanation. In a single moment, everything changes. The memories are still there, the laughter, the promises, the late-night conversations, the plans for the future. Yet suddenly those memories feel poisoned, because now a question refuses to leave your mind. Why? Why would someone who claimed to care about you betray you? Why would someone who smiled in your face hide something behind your back? Why would someone who promised loyalty become the source of your deepest pain? Most people spend years trying to answer these questions, and the strange part is that most never find the real answer. Instead, they tell themselves simple stories. They were evil. They never loved me. They were fake from the beginning. But what if the truth is far more disturbing? What if betrayal is not simply about cruelty? What if the person who hurt you was following a hidden psychological pattern that exists inside almost every human being? A pattern so powerful that philosophers have been studying it for thousands of years. A pattern that explains broken relationships, shattered friendships, workplace sabotage, family conflicts, and even some of the greatest tragedies in human history. Carl Jung spent decades exploring the darkness hidden inside the human mind. Marcus Aurelius observed it in politics and power. Buddha saw it in attachment. Nietzsche saw it in resentment. And today, in the age of social media, comparison, validation, and endless competition, this hidden force may be stronger than ever, because the betrayal was never only about you. It was also about something happening inside them. Something they may not have fully understood themselves. And once you understand what that is, everything changes. Not only how you see the person who betrayed you, but how you see yourself. Because the real lesson of betrayal is not what most people think. And by the end of this video, you may discover that the greatest gift hidden inside your deepest wound was there all along. But first, we need to uncover where betrayal actually begins. Because it starts in a place most people never look, inside the shadows of the human mind. Every betrayal begins with a hidden version of a person, not the version they show the world, not the version they show you, the version they hide. Carl Jung called this the shadow. The collection of desires, fears, insecurities, jealousies, and impulses that people refuse to acknowledge. At first, this makes no sense. After all, the person who betrayed you may have seemed kind. They may have seemed loyal. They may have appeared trustworthy for years, but here's what most people never realize. People often hide parts of themselves not only from others, but from themselves. Imagine a man who constantly tells everyone how happy he is. He posts smiling pictures online. He talks about gratitude. He appears confident, yet secretly he feels inadequate. He feels ignored. He feels unsuccessful compared to those around him. Instead of confronting those feelings, he buries them. And buried emotions do not disappear. They grow like seeds planted in darkness. The same thing happens in relationships. Someone may genuinely care about you, yet at the same time, they may secretly envy you. They may admire your confidence while feeling insecure about their own. They may love your success while resenting their failures. They may appreciate your presence while fearing they are not enough. And this is where everything changes, because humans are incredibly skilled at hiding uncomfortable truths, especially from themselves. Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious eventually controls us, and what we refuse to face inside ourselves often appears in destructive ways. The friend who betrays you may not simply hate you. The partner who lies may not simply enjoy deception. The colleague who sabotages you may not wake up thinking about ruining your life. Instead, they are often acting out conflicts they never resolved within themselves. The strange part is that many betrayals begin long before any action takes place. They begin with comparison. Comparison is one of the most dangerous psychological forces in modern life. Social media has amplified it to levels never seen before in human history. Every day, people are exposed to carefully edited versions of success, beauty, happiness, wealth, and achievement. They compare their reality to someone else's highlight reel. And slowly, resentment begins to grow, not always consciously, not always intentionally, but relentlessly. A person may celebrate your victories publicly, yet privately wonder why they are not experiencing the same success. They may smile when you achieve something meaningful, yet secretly feel smaller because of it. And if those emotions remain unchecked, they begin transforming. Admiration becomes envy. Envy becomes resentment. Resentment becomes justification. And justification becomes betrayal. This is where most people get it wrong. They believe betrayal starts with action. It doesn't. It starts with a story. A story the betrayer tells themselves. A story that allows them to feel justified, because almost nobody sees themselves as the villain. Even when they hurt others, they create explanations. They deserved it. They don't appreciate me. They would have done the same. I had no choice. What happened next reveals something shocking. The more people repeat these stories, the more real they become. Eventually, they stop seeing betrayal as betrayal. They begin seeing it as self-protection, as fairness, as necessity. And that's what makes betrayal so dangerous. Because by the time you discover it, the psychological process has often been unfolding for months or even years. Seneca once observed that people suffer more from their imagination than from reality. And nowhere is that more visible than in betrayal, because many betrayals are born not from facts, but from perceptions, assumptions, stories, unspoken fears. A person feels overlooked, a person feels threatened, a person feels insecure. And instead of confronting those emotions honestly, they create narratives that justify destructive behavior. The hidden truth is that betrayal often reveals more about the betrayer's inner world than it does about the person being betrayed. But here's the question nobody asks. If betrayal begins inside their shadow, why do some people confront their darkness while others become consumed by it? Why do some transform pain into wisdom, while others transform pain into destruction? The answer lies in another hidden force. A force that has shaped human behavior since the beginning of civilization. A force connected to ego, identity, and the desperate need to protect the image we have of ourselves. And once you understand that force, you'll see betrayal in a completely different way. Because the real psychology behind betrayal goes even deeper than the shadow, much deeper. The person who betrayed you was not only fighting a battle with you, they were fighting a battle with themselves. And the most dangerous battlefield in human psychology is not the heart, it is the ego. Most people hear the word ego and immediately think of arrogance. They imagine someone who constantly talks about themselves, seeks attention, or believes they are better than everyone else. But the ego is much more complicated than that. The ego is the identity you build around yourself. It is the story you tell yourself about who you are. It is the image you desperately want others to see. And sometimes that image becomes so important that a person will sacrifice truth, loyalty, and even love just to protect it. This is where betrayal takes a darker turn, because at first the betrayer may genuinely care about you. They may genuinely value the relationship, but then something happens. Something threatens their identity. Something challenges the story they have built about themselves. And suddenly, protecting their ego becomes more important than protecting the relationship. At first, this makes no sense. Why would someone destroy something valuable just to defend an illusion? Because the human mind fears psychological death. Not physical death, psychological death. The death of the image we have created of ourselves. Imagine someone who sees themselves as successful. Then they meet a friend who begins achieving more than they are. Every accomplishment of that friend becomes an unconscious threat. Not because success is bad, but because comparison forces them to confront an uncomfortable truth. Maybe they are not as successful as they believed. Maybe they are not as talented. Maybe they are not as special. And here is where everything changes. A psychologically mature person uses that discomfort as fuel for growth. They reflect, they learn, they improve, but an immature ego chooses another path. It seeks protection, and sometimes betrayal becomes that protection. Because destroying someone else's reputation can feel easier than confronting your own insecurity. This is why workplace betrayals happen. This is why friendships collapse. This is why relationships suddenly turn toxic. Not because one person woke up evil, but because one person's ego became more important than truth. The strange part is that social media has intensified this phenomenon dramatically. Every day people are performing versions of themselves, curated identities, filtered lives, carefully edited personalities. People become attached to appearances, to validation, to status, to being admired. And when reality threatens those things, panic begins. Marcus Aurelius understood this thousands of years ago. He observed how fragile human pride can be. He recognized that people often suffer because they become attached to external approval. The more your identity depends on what others think, the more desperate you become to protect that identity. And desperate people often make destructive choices. Think about a relationship where one partner secretly feels inadequate. Maybe they believe they are not attractive enough, not successful enough, not valuable enough. At first, they hide these feelings, but hidden insecurities rarely stay hidden forever. Eventually, they begin influencing behavior. They become suspicious, defensive, resentful, secretive, and then something unexpected happens. The person starts seeking validation elsewhere, not necessarily because they stopped loving their partner, but because they are trying to repair their damaged self-image. This is where most people get it wrong. They assume betrayal is always about the person who was betrayed, but here's what most people never realize. Many betrayals have very little to do with the victim. They are often attempts by the betrayer to escape their own emotional discomfort, to feel powerful, to feel desired, to feel significant, to feel enough. The tragedy is that these attempts never truly work, because the problem was never external. The problem was internal. Friedrich Nietzsche warned about this in his exploration of resentment. He noticed that people who cannot confront their own weaknesses often become consumed by bitterness. Instead of transforming themselves, they attack what reminds them of their inadequacy. And betrayal becomes one of the weapons they use. What happened next reveals something shocking. The more the ego controls a person's decisions, the less self-aware they become. They stop seeing reality clearly. They stop questioning their motivations. They stop recognizing the damage they cause. Instead, they become trapped inside their own narrative. The narrative always sounds reasonable from the inside. I deserve this. They don't understand me. I had no other option. I'm just doing what's best for me. But beneath those explanations often lies a deeper truth. Fear. Fear of failure. Fear of rejection. Fear of insignificance. Fear of confronting reality. Lao Tzu taught that true strength comes from mastering yourself, not controlling others, not defeating others, not proving yourself superior, mastering yourself. Yet most people spend their entire lives trying to control everything except themselves. And that's where betrayal is born. When self-mastery is absent, emotional chaos takes over. The ego begins making decisions, the shadow begins driving behavior, and the person gradually becomes disconnected from their own integrity. But here is the hidden truth nobody talks about. The betrayal was never the beginning. It was the symptom, the visible crack in a foundation that had been weakening for a long time. The lie, the cheating, the deception, the manipulation, those were merely outcomes. The real betrayal happened earlier. It happened when the person abandoned honesty with themselves. Because every act of betrayal starts with self-betrayal. A person ignores their fears. A person denies their insecurities. A person refuses to face uncomfortable truths. And eventually those unresolved conflicts spill into relationships. The Buddha understood this deeply. He taught that suffering often arises because people cling to illusions. Illusions about themselves, illusions about others, illusions about how life should be. When reality challenges those illusions, people resist, and that resistance creates suffering. The person who betrayed you may have been fighting reality itself, fighting their fears, fighting their insecurities, fighting truths they did not want to face. And somewhere in that struggle, they chose the wrong path. But here's a question that changes everything. If betrayal is rooted in insecurity and ego, why does it hurt so much? Why can one act of deception destroy years of trust? Why can one person's actions leave emotional wounds that last for decades? The answer has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with something inside you, something precious, something powerful, something most people never fully understand until it is broken. Trust. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover why betrayal feels like emotional death, and why that pain may secretly become the greatest transformation of your life. There is a reason betrayal hurts more than failure. There is a reason it hurts more than rejection. There is a reason people can recover from financial loss, career setbacks, and countless disappointments, yet still carry the memory of a betrayal 20 years later. Because betrayal does not only break your heart, it breaks your reality. And that is where the deepest pain begins. Think about it. When you trust someone, you create an invisible psychological world around them. You believe certain things are true. You believe they care. You believe they are honest. You believe they would never intentionally hurt you. You believe they are who they appear to be. Your mind slowly builds an entire reality around those assumptions. Then one day, the truth appears, and suddenly that reality collapses. The person you thought you knew seems like a stranger. The memories feel different. The conversations feel different. Even the happy moments become confusing. You begin replaying everything, every word, every promise, every interaction, searching for clues you missed, searching for answers, searching for a version of reality that still makes sense. But here's what most people never realize. The pain is not only coming from what happened, the pain is coming from the destruction of certainty, and human beings crave certainty more than almost anything else. Viktor Frankl observed that people can endure enormous suffering if they can find meaning within it. But meaningless suffering feels unbearable. Betrayal often feels meaningless. It arrives without warning, without explanation, without logic. One moment you feel safe. The next moment, your entire emotional foundation has been shattered. And that is why betrayal often feels like emotional death. Because something inside you actually dies. Not your body, not your future, but an old version of yourself. The version that believed the world worked a certain way. The version that trusted without hesitation. The version that felt emotionally secure. At first, this realization is terrifying. Because when trust breaks, the mind enters survival mode. Suddenly you question everything, not just the betrayer, everyone. You wonder if people are hiding things. You wonder if anyone can be trusted. You wonder whether love itself is an illusion. This is where many people become trapped. The betrayal ends, but the psychological prison remains. Years later, they are still carrying the wound, still reliving the story, still allowing one person's actions to shape their entire view of humanity. And that's where everything changes, because this is the moment where two different paths emerge. The first path is bitterness. The second path is transformation. Most people never realize they are making this choice. It happens slowly, silently, one thought at a time. The bitter path feels natural. After all, pain wants protection. The mind begins creating walls. If I never trust again, I can't be hurt again. If I never love deeply again, I can't be betrayed again. If I expect the worst from people, I'll never be disappointed. At first, these ideas feel intelligent, they feel safe, they feel practical. But here's the hidden truth. Those walls do not only keep pain out, they keep life out, they keep connection out, they keep growth out, they keep love out. The strange part is that many people spend years believing they are protecting themselves when they are actually imprisoning themselves. Epictetus taught that events themselves do not destroy us. Our interpretation of those events does. That doesn't mean betrayal is acceptable. It doesn't mean your pain isn't real. It means the meaning you assign to the betrayal determines what happens next. And this is where most people get it wrong. They believe the betrayal destroyed them, but the betrayal only revealed something that was always there. Their dependence on certainty, their dependence on external validation, their dependence on people remaining exactly who they expected them to be. What happened next reveals something shocking. Many of the strongest people in history were transformed by betrayal, not because betrayal is good, but because it forced them to confront truths they would never have discovered otherwise. Truths about human nature, truths about resilience, truths about themselves. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal within political circles. Julius Caesar faced betrayal from trusted allies. Countless philosophers, leaders, artists, and visionaries experienced betrayal in one form or another, and yet many emerged wiser. Why? Because eventually they stopped asking one question: why did this happen to me? And they started asking another: what is this experience trying to teach me? That question changes everything, because now the pain becomes information, now the wound becomes a teacher, now the suffering becomes a doorway. Imagine someone whose partner betrayed them after 10 years together. Initially, they are devastated. Their confidence collapses. Their world falls apart. But over time, they begin noticing something. For years, they ignored red flags. For years, they abandoned their own needs. For years, they sacrificed their boundaries to keep the relationship alive. The betrayal did not create those problems. It exposed them, and that's where healing begins, not when the pain disappears, but when the pain starts revealing truth. Carl Jung believed that profound transformation often begins with confrontation. Confrontation with reality, confrontation with suffering, confrontation with parts of ourselves we would rather avoid. Betrayal forces that confrontation. It strips away illusions. It removes comfortable fantasies. It reveals what is real. And while that process feels brutal, it can also become liberating, because once an illusion dies, reality becomes visible. The strange part is that trust itself becomes stronger after genuine healing, not weaker. Most people assume betrayal permanently destroys trust, but healthy trust was never blind trust. Healthy trust includes awareness, discernment, boundaries, wisdom. A child trusts blindly. A wise person trusts consciously, and that difference changes everything. The person who has never been betrayed often trusts naively. The person who heals from betrayal learns how to trust intelligently. That lesson is priceless. But here's where the story takes another unexpected turn. Because the greatest damage caused by betrayal is not always the loss of trust in others. Sometimes it's the loss of trust in yourself. You start wondering how you missed the signs. You question your judgment. You question your instincts. You question your worth. And this is where the deepest healing must occur, because your future does not depend on trusting everyone. It depends on trusting yourself again, trusting your ability to survive disappointment, trusting your ability to adapt, trusting your ability to recognize truth, trusting your ability to walk away when necessary, trusting your ability to rebuild. And once that self-trust returns, something remarkable happens. The betrayal loses its power, not because you forget, not because the event disappears, but because your identity is no longer attached to it. You stop seeing yourself as the betrayed person. You start seeing yourself as the transformed person. But here's the question that remains. If betrayal can become a catalyst for transformation, what is the ultimate lesson hidden inside it? What is the final truth that philosophers, sages, and wise thinkers have pointed toward for centuries? Because the deepest lesson of betrayal has nothing to do with revenge, nothing to do with proving yourself, nothing to do with making the other person regret what they did. It has everything to do with freedom. And in the final chapter, you'll discover why the greatest victory after betrayal is not getting even. It's becoming someone the betrayal can no longer control. The greatest mistake people make after betrayal is believing their story is about the person who hurt them. For months, sometimes years, their mind remains trapped inside the same prison. They replay conversations. They imagine different outcomes. They fantasize about revenge. They hope the betrayer will suffer. They hope the betrayer will realize what they lost. They hope the betrayer will come back and finally explain everything. And while all of this is happening, something tragic occurs. The betrayal continues, not because the other person is still hurting them, but because they are carrying the betrayer inside their mind every single day. The strange part is that many people never notice this. They believe they are waiting for closure. But what they are actually doing is giving away their freedom. Because every moment spent obsessing over the betrayer is a moment they are not living their own life. This is where most people get it wrong. They think healing means understanding every detail. They think healing means receiving an apology. They think healing means getting answers. But here's what most people never realize. Some answers never come. Some apologies never arrive. Some people never acknowledge the damage they caused. And if your peace depends on those things, your peace remains in their hands. That is why the final lesson of betrayal is not about them. It is about reclaiming yourself. At first, this sounds simple, but psychologically, it is one of the hardest things a human being can do, because the ego wants justice, the wounded heart wants validation, the injured mind wants certainty. Yet life rarely provides all three, and that's where everything changes. Because true healing begins when you stop asking life to be fair, not because fairness doesn't matter, but because reality does not operate according to our expectations. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He constantly reminded himself that people would act selfishly, dishonestly, and irrationally, not because humanity is evil, but because humanity is flawed. The moment you accept that truth, betrayal stops feeling like a shocking exception. It becomes part of the human condition. And strangely enough, that realization is liberating, because now you stop personalizing everything. You stop believing every betrayal was a statement about your worth. You stop assuming someone else's choices define your value. You begin seeing people more clearly, not as heroes, not as villains, but as imperfect human beings struggling with their own fears, insecurities, desires, and limitations. And here's the hidden truth. The person who betrayed you may never fully escape the consequences of what they did, not necessarily external consequences. Internal consequences, because every action shapes character, every decision strengthens a pattern, every betrayal leaves a mark on the person who commits it. A person who repeatedly chooses dishonesty becomes less capable of genuine intimacy. A person who repeatedly chooses manipulation becomes trapped in distrust. A person who repeatedly abandons integrity slowly loses connection with themselves. This is something ancient philosophers understood well. Character is destiny. The choices we make eventually become the person we are. And that means betrayal always has a cost, even when nobody else sees it. But here's where the deepest transformation occurs. You realize their destiny is no longer your concern. Your responsibility is your own character, your own growth, your own future. Because while betrayal reveals who they are, your response reveals who you are. And that is the ultimate test. Anyone can remain kind when life is easy. Anyone can remain calm when they are treated well. Anyone can remain loving when everything goes according to plan. But what happens when trust is shattered? What happens when your heart is broken? What happens when someone you loved becomes the source of your pain? That is where character is forged, like steel inside fire. Nietzsche once wrote that what does not destroy us can make us stronger. Many people misunderstand this idea. Strength does not automatically emerge from suffering. Some people become bitter, some become cynical, some become emotionally numb. Suffering alone changes nothing. What matters is what you do with it, and that's where the final choice appears. You can allow betrayal to make you smaller, or you can allow it to make you wiser. You can allow it to close your heart, or you can allow it to deepen your understanding. You can allow it to define your story, or you can allow it to become one chapter in a much larger journey. The strange part is that many people eventually discover something unexpected. The betrayal they once believed ruined their life actually redirected it. The relationship that ended forced them to grow. The friendship that collapsed revealed hidden truths. The opportunity they lost led them toward a better one. The pain they feared became the catalyst for transformation. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually, because growth often arrives disguised as loss. And that's what most people never see in the beginning. Buddha taught that attachment is one of the primary sources of suffering. We become attached to people, attached to expectations, attached to how we think life should unfold. Then reality arrives and refuses to follow our script. The result is pain, yet hidden inside that pain is an invitation to release what no longer serves us, an invitation to stop building our identity around things we cannot control, an invitation to discover a deeper source of stability, one that does not depend on another person's loyalty, one that does not depend on circumstances, one that does not depend on external validation. That source is found within, and once you discover it, betrayal loses much of its power. Because your peace no longer depends on another person's behavior. Your worth no longer depends on another person's opinion. Your future no longer depends on another person's choices. You become free, not because the past changes, but because you change. So let us return to the question that began this journey. Why did this person betray you? The answer is deeper than most people imagine. They betrayed you because of insecurities they never confronted, because of shadows they never understood, because of fears they never healed, because of an ego they could not control, because of stories they told themselves, because of wounds they carried, because of psychological forces operating beneath their awareness. But here's the most important truth of all. Their betrayal was never a measure of your value. Read that again. Their betrayal was never a measure of your value. People often spend years believing they were betrayed because they were not enough, not attractive enough, not successful enough, not lovable enough, not worthy enough. But betrayal rarely reveals the value of the person who was betrayed. It reveals the character of the person who chose betrayal. And once you understand that, an enormous burden falls from your shoulders. You stop carrying responsibility for choices that were never yours. You stop blaming yourself for someone else's lack of integrity. You stop questioning your worth every time you remember what happened. And slowly, something beautiful begins to emerge. Wisdom, not the wisdom found in books, not the wisdom found in quotes, the wisdom earned through experience, the wisdom that can only be gained by walking through darkness and finding your way back to the light. One day, perhaps years from now, you may look back at this chapter of your life differently. You may still remember the pain. You may still remember the disappointment, but you will also remember the strength you discovered, the resilience you developed, the self-respect you built, the clarity you gained. You will realize that the betrayal did not end your story. It revealed it, because every great transformation begins with the collapse of an illusion. And betrayal is often the moment when illusion dies, the illusion that people are exactly who they appear to be, the illusion that life is always fair, the illusion that your happiness can safely be placed in someone else's hands. When those illusions disappear, reality becomes visible, and reality, though painful at first, is where freedom begins. So if someone betrayed you, do not ask how to erase the pain. Ask what the pain is trying to teach you. Do not ask why they became who they became. Ask who you are becoming because of this experience. Do not spend your life chasing closure from someone who broke your trust. Create your own closure through growth, through understanding, through courage, through moving forward. Because the greatest revenge is not revenge at all. The greatest revenge is becoming someone who no longer needs it. And perhaps that is the final lesson hidden inside every betrayal. The person who hurt you expected to leave a wound. They never expected that wound to become wisdom. They never expected the pain to become strength. They never expected the broken pieces to become the foundation of a stronger life. Yet that is exactly what can happen. And when it does, betrayal loses its final weapon, because the moment suffering becomes wisdom, the moment pain becomes purpose, the moment the wound becomes transformation. You are no longer the victim of the story. You become the author of what comes next.